Hello everybody, it's Ben with the DIY Homefront, and I am sitting at a restored picnic table, and man, it looks nice. I think I'll show you a picture of what it looked like before.
I looked and I did not film any before footage, but what I have found is a picture of me working on the roof dated 13 August 2004, and there's that picnic table sitting on the same deck that's behind the garage right now, 20 years later. And you may not agree or like some of my methods, but they do work. I also included two pictures from October of 2022 where I was working on the pump house. And you can see the picnic table is pretty beat up.
Ouch, man, that's in rough shape. And I broke it the other day too. Well, let's get into this. I was working on this pick table the other day and I broke this piece of wood.
And I made this probably about 20 years ago. And it's got these old Phillips style screws that are really easy to strip out instead of the torque bits that we use nowadays. I was having a difficult time with this first screw. Like I said, those type of screw heads just like to strip. But the second and third screw on this board just spun freely, which in the end didn't give me much choice other than to just rip the board loose.
Can you see this? That's loose too.
I am really glad that they went to those torque heads. They work so much better for decking and as an outdoor screw. This is pretty much standard what it's like to take screws out of an old deck too, sometimes even with those torque heads. This trick works sometimes, taking a screw and trying to clean out all the trash that's in the screw head, so that way the drill bit gets a better bite. But don't expect this trick to work every time. So these screws are just spinning freely too, and there's nothing really holding the board to the picnic table. That's when I realized that the boards on both ends that this top screws into are split right down the middle. So I'm going to have to remove all these top boards, and you'll be able to see what I mean. I put the picnic table up on its end, so I had easy access to this board that runs down the middle. I'm going to need to take all these screws out if I'm going to get these boards off the top. I will also unscrew the two boards that come in at an angle. They help support the table and keep it from being wobbly. It actually looks pretty good on the underside of this board. I know there's some bugs and some leaves, but it doesn't look like a lot of rot. After these two boards are out, we can put the table right side up and finish getting the top off. I thought this oversized hammer was going to make quick work on getting these boards off. But I was wrong. Eventually I was able to get all these boards up with the hammer. And then the next task was to try to get the screws out. I do want to reuse these boards if they're in good shape. So getting the screws out is important. And sometimes when it's 20 years old, you just have to take what you can get. So having the screws out of the way will have to be as good as having them gone. All right, this is the last board. And like the other ones, this screw just spins. And this one actually comes out. So a couple taps with the hammer and it comes loose. And then you just have to do what you can do to try to get the screws out. That's if you're planning on reusing the wood at least. So I priced the wood and it's about $9 a board to replace it. And I also priced a new picnic table at Lowe's. And they're not made out of the best wood or constructed the best. But it was $170 for a new picnic table. And my goal is to refinish this one as economically as I can. So it means taking these screws out. This is how I get screws out if they have rusted off or broke off. I use a punch, or in this case, my little Torx bit, and hammer the head up until I can grab it with a pair of pliers. Next, I'm going to remove this piece on both ends. This is what the top screwed into. And there's so many screws down the center of it that this wood is actually split. And that's why it's not grabbing a hold of the top boards anymore. And that's why the top was so loose, because the screws are coming out. It seems like there's always one screw in each board that just does not want to come out. At least one screw in each board. This is the other end. And now you can really see what I was talking about. This board is just split down the center and there's really nothing holding the top on. Definitely going to replace both of those boards. I tried hitting it with the hammer and couldn't get it out. So now it's on to plan B. Now that I've got this board off, I'll get this screw out. And that should be the last little bit until we figure out what condition the top boards were in, how much more wood we're going to need, and getting that wood cut to the right size.
Well, like always, my small projects turn into big projects, and the top of the picnic table is pretty much shut. So let's see where we stand. I was looking at the end of this board, and I went to pull, and it just separated. That's what happens. Sometimes these cracks pretty much go all the way through the wood. So I've got 2 of these 10-foot long 2x6s that are dry, and I've got 5 that are wet. But they really need to be dry if you're going to try to seal them. If they're wet, the sealer just doesn't soak in at all.
So the first 2 pieces I'm going to cut are the ones that go on each end of the table and that the top screws into. So I'll take one of the existing pieces and put it on my miter saw and use that to make sure I get my cut at the right angle.
And I obviously need 2 of these because that is worthless.
So this wood is from the back decks. I save all the wood I take up. It might have some rot on one end, but still for the most part is a good board, especially since they're almost 10 feet long. So I'll cut both of them out of this one piece of wood.
Still looks like decent wood in there. It's okay that this is going to be taller. We just want to make sure that it's the same width.
And I'll use this old board as a measure to make sure I get it cut to the right length. This board came from the center of the underside of the table, and I'll use this wider board to make one to take its place. I like to cut the ends off of these boards. It helps remove some of the splits in the wood where it dried and make sure the end is at a true 90-degree angle. And now I will measure it and cut it and use it for the tabletop.
I need to take this whole leg off.
I'm going to use it as a template to make 2 more legs because these ones are rotting. Just like before, I'll use this leg to adjust the miter saw to get the right angle. I will start by cutting one end of the leftover piece from that 10-foot board. I will put my leg on top of it and then carefully adjust the saw and make my final cut. I find this method easier than measuring the board and then trying to transfer the marks to another board to be cut. We'll repeat this process again using a piece of scrap decking. I will measure and cut 2 more scrap pieces of decking to use as 2 more boards for the top of this picnic table. And that should replace all the rotten wood. So the next thing we need to do for this restoration project is sand all the wood. We'll start by using 80 grit and sand everything, and then we'll go back and use 120 grit and sand everything. We'll get all the pieces that we've cut and what's left of the table that's still put together. One thing I should have done is I should have worn a mask. I didn't realize how much sawdust was all over my clothes till I saw this. But we will pick this back up tomorrow and we'll be in the backyard and get a good protective coat put on everything. This is the stain sealer we'll be using, and it's been tinted to the color of royal garnet. Now when I bought this, I divided it up and put it in 2 separate buckets to make it easier to pour, and the bucket you're about to see is the one that I usually pour from. Okay, I've got the stain sealer all shaken up.
I've got my brush all cleaned up. I'm going to put it in a smaller bucket so it's easier to work with.
I'm going to get the stain sealer on all the individual pieces before I reassemble this picnic table. And I'm going to use a paintbrush because I like the way it works the stain sealer into the wood. I know it's not as fast or as easy as using a sprayer, but I like to use a paintbrush. If you are painting your furniture outside, you can always take wax paper or parchment paper and put it under the legs, and you don't have to worry about it sticking to the paint. Now I need to attach the 2 pieces of wood that the top will screw into.
This is 29. I will measure this. It's 29, which would be 14 and a half.
All 3 pieces will be flush with each other, and the mark we made will go right in the gap between the 2 boards. The next thing to do is to make some marks where we're going to put our screws, and we're going to drill these out to keep it from splitting the wood, because all this wood is dry. I'll put some screws in these holes by hand, and then start them with the impact driver. Once again, I'll make sure all the tops are level, and then I've got it centered. And I'll go ahead and put these screws in. On second thought, I decided to take the top 2 screws out and re-drill the holes all the way as deep as I could get them. And that should keep these screws from splitting that second board that they're going into behind the first one. Once I have all 4 of these in, it won't be any problem at all, just to drill straight in for the other side. And then I can attach the screws to it. We will repeat the process on the other side. Line up the piece of wood, make some pilot holes with the drill, and then put the screws in. Well, it's really important to make sure that this first board is in the right spot and in the center. And you can tell I went back and forth quite a few times figuring it out. I even forgot to seal the side to be facing down. I will definitely drill pilot holes for all these screws. I don't want the piece of wood that we replaced to split down the middle like the last one did. I'm also only going to put 2 screws per board instead of 3, and hopefully that will keep it from splitting also. After a quick check of my measurements, we got the other end taken care of too. It takes a lot to get that first board in, but once it's in, you can just eagle eye the other boards and they go pretty fast. Don't forget on these outside boards, you need to put the screw in at an angle because that piece of wood underneath it is cut at an angle. You don't want it poking out the side. So I did the same thing on all 4 corners and got the other boards attached. And I was about to start staining and sealing it when I realized that the center board was upside down. So I had to stop and unscrew it, turn it over, and screw it back in. So let's get that done. I was not sure if the holes would all line up, so I drilled them out again just to make sure I wouldn't split that piece of wood. We've still got the 2 braces that keep the table from being wobbly to screw in, and those are accessed from underneath the table. But once these are screwed in, we can put our tools away, and that will leave just putting the stain sealer on the top and the benches. All right, here's our restored picnic table. It's got 1 new board on the top, 2 boards that are recycled from the deck on the top. We've replaced 2 legs and 2 boards from the frame that hold the top on. For a picnic table that's over 20 years old, we're doing pretty good.
Well, I hope you enjoyed watching me work. We're all done here. I have a little bit of cleanup left, and I only have one thing left to say. Thanks for watching. Like, subscribe, check out the playlist, and I'll see you in the next video.